Hey everybody, welcome to the World Series of Board Gaming's How to Win series. Today we are taking a look at Ra, and it's not just me this time. No, I've enlisted the help of my good friend Brian, who loves Ra. He was aching to come on. You might recognize Brian from our interview series that we did with all the designers. So it was fun to bounce tips off of each other. And if you haven't seen it, the ring final for the World Series of Board Gaming Ra 2023. Wow, man, oh man, was it a good game. That just aired over on Dice Tower. You can check that out if you want to get a taste of the fun and the frenetic and the wild strategies that people can do with Ra and the stories. Ted, who had never played Ra before, made it to the finals. Ra is one of those games that is just so unpredictable, and yet a really good player can also mitigate a lot of that risks. It's a wild, incredible accomplishment in design, so simple to learn, and so much replayability. I love Ra so much, so let's get into the tips. But before we do, I do have to let you know, if you're interested in winning a $3,000 ring, Super Bowl style, with diamonds and Ra etched on the side and the 25th Century Games etched on the other side, and proving that at every game night you're the best of the best, this is our Super Bowl. You can still get tickets to WSBG Vegas 2024, and if you buy before April 1st, you can get $50 off with this special promotion. You could win your share of $100,000 in cash and prizes just for playing board games. The World Series of Board Gaming is back and bigger than ever. High-level play, friendly competition, national championships, there's no other event of its kind. Are you the next big name in board gaming? Get your tickets now at WSBGVegas.com and use the code IMN to save yourself up to $50. What are you waiting for? It's time to get in the game. Now remember, that code also applies to other tier levels. If you're just in for open gaming, you just want to go for 24/7 gaming 5 days a week, you can do that. It'll knock stuff off every ticket. So just plug it in at checkout. I want to make sure you get the best deal. And the longer you wait, the less great those deals will be because we got to firm up numbers, right? And if you're unsure of what to play, may I suggest Ra? Because I'm going to give you all the tips you need to succeed right now. Let's go check in with Brian. And here, of course, we have, for our 5 tips, our 5 strategy tips, I have resident Ra expert, Brian Muller.
Glad to be here. Love this Ra game. In fact, if I were able to sneak my way in into the World Series of Board Games, I would definitely play this game.
This is the one
you probably need a bit of a disguise, so let's see here.
There you go.
Do I look any different? Do you recognize me?
You know what? I think you could do it. I think we might see Santa Dog in the next year's tournament. Hopefully, you haven't just given away your disguise, Brian, and you'll still be able to sneak in and play in Ra. Yeah, Ra is such a fun game. I'm glad to have you here because I know it's your number one, right? And so I was like, well, when I needed strategy tips, I got to turn to the be all and end all of all the Ra champions that I know. I wanted to have you here to talk a little bit about strategy. So for people who are unfamiliar with the game, maybe you can use these tips when you're getting into it to kind of focus you, hone your skills, and direct your thinking. And who knows, maybe you can go on a run and end up in the final table like a couple of our finalists that we just finished recording the commentary on. If you haven't seen it, go check it out over on Dice Tower. It's a friggin' blast.
It definitely is. And I think there's a lot of things in that video that will correspond to what I'm going to talk about today. I do think there are some things to do that I like to do. There's ways to think about the game that will bend. There's luck in this game, but if you play right, you can bend that luck in your favor, and that gives you an advantage over some of the other players at the table.
For sure. Sometimes it just won't fall your way, and the luck won't fall your way. But it's like that in every game, right? The tile comes up. You need that tile to sometimes come up, but there are ways to mitigate that. And why don't you get us started with number 1, Brian?
Yeah, number 1 for me is paced scoring. I think there's a lot of games where you can pace yourself. So my main priority when I'm playing Ra is I feel that I'm a good player. I feel I'm a smart player, and most of the people will probably feel the same about themselves as well too. What you want to do is make sure when you get to that third epoch, you put yourself in a place where you can win. You don't
Hmm.
want to be in a place where you have to do a lot of catch up. Now, sometimes that's just where you are, but by doing a technique, I think there's a couple different ways to approach this. I'll talk about one at the end of this video, but my favorite way to approach the game is pace scoring.
Yeah.
So when the game begins, the very first thing that you get handed out is 10 points. Okay, you
Yep.
hand out 10 points, but if you do the math on this, and I'll go through the math real quickly, you start 21 points down because you're -2 for being lowest in pharaohs, and you're -5 because you don't have any civilization. So you start out at a net of -11. Now, scores that should win the game, you probably want to be in the 40s. So there's a 5-point swing either way for
The sun
the
tiles.
sun tiles at the end of the game, and I think it's worth being in a place where you might be able to tilt those or not. So I try to score 40 points. So 40 plus the 11 that you already owe puts you at 51.
Yeah.
So that means, if you divide that by the epochs, that's 17 points for each epoch. You have 3 tiles going into each epoch. And so I like to break those tiles down at 4, 6, and 7. I really don't care which tiles I have,
Yeah.
but I want to try and score 4 points, 6 points, and 7 points on average. That gets me to my average of 17, which
Yeah.
17 times 3 is 51. I end up at the game, I'm in the hunt if I do that. So that's pace scoring.
Yeah, that's a really great point in terms of it not really mattering what sun tiles you have. Your lowest gets you 4 points, your middle gets you 6, your highest gets you 7. If you kind of use that as a bar, you can know where you are in the game, right? You can know if you have that work to catch up, if you got to make some big risky plays, if you have to depend upon the luck of the draw and eke out those extra points. But knowing that bar and knowing those sorts of average scores, I think is really good, and it kind of leads us into our number 2 point, which is about the value of the sundials. Right?
Right. Don't overvalue your sun tiles.
Hmm.
Don't overvalue them at the beginning of the game. Don't overvalue them in the middle of the game, and definitely don't overvalue them at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So one of the things to remember is the game has a little bit of cumulative scoring going on in the game. So like you'll hear on the video, you'll hear Ted talking and Lloyd talking about that they count the river tiles as 2 points. So you can either do that when you're counting out your value for your tiles, or you can count them differently. So you'll score a little bit less in the first epoch than in the second epoch and the third epoch, because you'll have a cumulative scoring. But you don't need to play when you might be dealt your opening hand of sun tiles might be the 13 and the 2.
Yeah.
So don't overvalue the 13. It still only needs to take 7 points to be valued, which is a sieve and maybe a pharaoh tile, and that's really a good play, even if you have the 13. And the same thing for the 2. Don't undervalue that either. I know you're pressing coming in with raw quickly to press the other players to make a bad decision. You're trying to get them to overplay their tiles by pushing out.
Yeah.
But realize that you still want to walk away with 4 points with that bottom 2 tile.
Yeah.
And I think you watched that last game, middle of the epoch with David playing the 3, 7, and 8. Was he playing? And he scored
3, 7, 8. Scored a
points.
ton of points, right? Just in terms of like timing it out and making other people get less value, giving you the ability to get more value. What I love about this is that's a really good tip for new players. When I first started playing Raw, my first game of Raw, I had the 13, and I thought, you know what? This is the best tile in the game. This is the best tile in the game. I am not spending it. I'm not spending it until I get a full row. I'm just not doing it. And you know what happened? I ate that 13 and I never got a chance to play it because all the raw tiles came out, right? I wasn't valuing that pace. I was hoping for that big score, and it didn't happen. And so that's something that you could really fall into, and that's how you mitigate the luck, which I think is a really great tip in terms of pacing yourself and not doing what I did in my first game, be like, my 13's the best. I don't think I played it the whole game. I think Raw came up the whole time, and then I ended up scoring like 2 points off of it in the very last end. And I could have done a lot more if I had worked that out. So I think that's a great tip. What's our tip number 3, Brian?
So I'm going to go with tracking. So also again in the finals, one of the really strong players at the table was Ted, who's an acquire player. I do not have acquire level tracking skills. So what I end up doing is I prioritize what I'm going to track.
Yeah.
And the number one most important thing for me to track is the score.
Yeah.
Right. I need to know the score because I need to know what everybody is thinking about the game in the second epoch and the third
Hmm.
epoch, and their knowledge of their own score is going to influence how they think about the game.
Yeah.
The second thing I'm going to track is the flood tiles. There are 12 flood tiles out there. If you've got one
Yeah.
of the old school boards, run through the counts of every single tile, get to know them. You want to know if the bag is rich in flood tiles or if it's light in flood tiles,
Hmm.
because you can bully your opponent if you know what the flood tile count is and he doesn't. You can make him make picks that he doesn't want to make,
Yeah.
and that knowledge is really important. The other ones that are to track, I would next track if I can remember it. Sometimes I don't have this level of tracking, but the killer tiles are worth having an idea about.
Yeah.
There's 2, 2, and 4, so there's a total of 8 on the killer tracks. It's a decent size to know about that because that also dictates whether the board is rich or not. You definitely want to track the raw tiles. The raw
Yeah.
tiles are really easy to track. So if you're in a 4-player game, you're already starting with 3 extra raw tiles in the back, and every time that an epoch ends with somebody busting on a raw tile, you have to put one back in the bag. So a lot of games you'll get to the 4th epoch and there'll be 4 extra sun tiles in the bag, 4
Yeah.
extra raw tiles.
Raw
in the bag.
tiles. Yeah.
Yeah, keep that in mind. Especially like a lot of people like to stick their hand in and feel the bag before they make a decision. Feel that bag, know what the weight is. If you
Hmm.
know that there's 4 raw tiles and you know that there's 4 killer tiles, that's going to influence your decisions.
Yeah. That'll those sorts of things, the negative things, tracking the negative things helps influence your probability of that draw. And I think the flood tiles are super important, knowing that there's only 12 of them, especially if you're loaded up on Nile tiles, but in the first epoch, 8 flood tiles went by. You've only got 4 chances to score those Niles in the next 2 epochs, right? So paying attention, I think the flood tiles are I think that if you can only track one thing, if you don't have a memory palace in your head and you want to actually interact with people around the table as well and not just count numbers to yourself, uh, then it might be a good thing to track to focus on. I think that's a great order of prioritization, that the score and the flood tiles, and then moving down from there.
Yeah.
And speaking about table talk, that brings us into our number 4.
Yeah, the number 4 thing is begin the game by being social. It's
Yeah.
so important. It's so important, even if you're really really heavy into the competition, because when you get to the second epoch and the third
Hmm.
epoch, you need to have a good read on your players that you're
Yeah.
playing against. This game is all about understanding the other players at the table, understanding their board position, understand how they're thinking about things, understand how they're approaching things. Are they counting value of tiles the same way you are? Are they or not? Are they valuing pharaohs too much?
Hmm.
What are they? Do they not care about gold? Are they overvaluing their god tile? Are they overvaluing a triple set? Are they? And then the other ones are the really important to have a read on. This is why it's important to have a read on the score. When
Yeah.
you get to the last epoch, it's important to remember that a player that has been playing a number value system throughout the game suddenly comes off that in the third epoch. And if you're not paying attention to this, you're going to say, well, why are you suddenly playing different? Well, the players are playing to win the game.
Yeah.
So if you know that there's somebody whose score is really bad, the way they play the game is going to completely change,
Yeah.
and you need to understand that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I like to do is I really can look at people and get a sense for how important for them is it to win the sun tile battle and get the 5-point swing and not lose the 5-point swing. Really, that's only the same score as a civilization. It's the same score as a civilization. But some players see that as their only out to win when they come into the end of the game. And
Yeah.
if you've got a read on them, you can pot bully them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
you know when they want that sun tile, you can make sure that they go in sooner. You can call raw because they're probably going to go in because they're focused on that sundial battle,
right.
right? Yeah.
Right, and also too, like if you get to the end of the game, there's a nice pot out there, but the sun tile is a 2,
Hmm.
right? So they can't perceive themselves winning without winning the sun tile. So you can draw one more time. You can take
Yeah.
one more draw. They're gonna stay out of it because
Yeah.
they can't read it.
Yeah.
So I think that is another really big tip.
I think it's huge. It's huge. It's a social game, right? All of the games that we've witnessed and recorded have table talk. People are chatting around the table. They're sussing each other out because
Yeah,
it's a poker game. It's a bluffing and bidding game, right?
for
And
sure,
so
for sure.
it's very similar to the skills that you would find in poker of people saying, "Okay, yeah, I raise you." Because they want
It
someone
is.
to raise more. They don't
It
want you to
is.
go out. They don't want you to
Yeah,
because they have the best hand. They want you to like overbid yourself. And so it's the very similar back and forth. So you want to get a sense of the players and how they play. And there's a really wonderful moment in the commentary that was one of my favorite where Lloyd looks across to David and he's like, why didn't you take that? Like that was worth 5 points for you. And David's like, hey, are you a conservative player? And Lloyd's like, yeah. He's like, would you call yourself a conservative player? He's like, I guess so. He's like, I like to play a little bit more dangerously. And
exactly.
it's like one of my favorite moments of that stream because you see these two players like figuring each other out and David would be like, I already got your number. You don't have my number. You don't know what I'm gonna do. And that gives me a little bit more flexibility. So like getting that social aspect I think is huge and this really lends itself well to that sort of interaction because it's based upon sussing out your opponent, right?
For
It's
sure.
is your opponent going to make the choice or not? Because there's so many variables to consider, so many little tweaks of how to play, so many different ways to play, and figuring out how your opponent is going to play is huge. And I guess that kind of brings us to our number 5, which is
Yeah,
don't be afraid to go off meta.
that's right. Don't be afraid to go off meta. Don't come in with the scripted
Hmm.
strategy. Don't say, "Hey, I'm going buildings," or "I'm going pharaohs," or "I'm going
Yeah.
rivers," or "I'm just going to go 2 out of 3." You don't, and in fact, even saying I'm going to use pace scoring, maybe that's not the right strategy for you.
Hmm.
I know another very, very good player that I play with, and he uses a slightly different method where he's looking at his 3 sun tiles and says, I just want to open and get, I want to get, I forget what his exact math is, but he says, I want to get 3 tiles with my lowest tile, 4 tiles with my next tile, and 6 tiles with my top tile. If I walk
Yeah.
out of that, I'll outplay you later in the game. And so that's a fine method too. You just play the game. Sit
Yeah.
down and play the game. Don't play your strategy. Play the game.
Yeah, and responding as well to the game's state. You'll see if you watch the Ring Final for 2023, you'll see the first epoch is very raw heavy. You can feel the players desperately trying to respond to that pace that the game itself is setting. And then you get to sort of the second epoch, and some of the players react to that, and some of the players don't. Some players are still in that mental shift, right? That pace
Exactly.
and pushing it, and some players are not.
Yeah.
And it's a
Uh,
really wild thing to see of risking the game state, knowing when to pivot, knowing when the tension does ramp up, and being able to respond to that. I think you have to be able to be malleable because it's one of those games where if you go in with a set plan, you might lose.
well, I'll quote Lloyd on this one, but he says that Ra is a jerk, and he certainly is. If your strategy needs Ra to come out at an even pace, Ra won't. Ra's
Yeah,
not going to listen to you.
yeah,
Ra's going to come out how Ra wants to come out. Sometimes he'll come out really fast and
yeah,
tease you and make you stressed out. And if you can be poised in that stressful situation, he'll come out, he'll balance himself out.
yeah.
And sometimes if he comes out heavy early, he's going to take his time later.
There you
So
go.
Ra is a jerk.
Words to live by. You never know what Raw's gonna bring you. So those are kind of our tips. Those are our little strategy tips to get you off on the raw foot. Dang it. You bring out the
There
worst
it
in me,
is. There it
Brian.
is, folks.
You
There's
you
the
bring out the worst in me. Thanks, Brian, for these tips. And if you haven't gotten your ticket yet for WSBG Vegas 2024, you can use the code I am in. Don't forget to use that code. You can get $50 off your stay and play ticket. You can come join in the action. Seriously, Raw would be a wonderful pick if you're unsure about what to do on that day because it can be so delicious. Things can fall your way, and you just need a little bit of luck and have Raw on your side to have it happen. So I look forward to seeing a bunch of new Raw players in WSBG, and I think it's going to be the best year yet. Brian, any advice for people who are going to be coming to play in WSBG
sure. Yeah,
2024?
just be prepared, be loose.
Hmm.
Pace yourself, not just for in the game, but pace yourself for the whole 4 days. It's a long ride. It's a
Yeah,
long ride.
for sure.
And I'm in too. So see me when you're there. Say hi to me.
Yeah, absolutely. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back again next week with more strategy tips for more games and WSBG. From all of us here, thanks for being here. My name's Chris George.
And I'm Brian Muller.
And what are you waiting for? As we say here in Vegas, get in the game.